Beyond the forbidden.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate you, taking your time. I know that you, and we may go and start here, but I know that you, I want to say you emailed me or something, maybe a year or two ago. I'm not sure. I didn't really check my previous emails, but Fringe, really had some great things to say about you, and I was like, why does that name sound familiar? And I look back and I remember seeing that I guess we conversed a little bit. I guess it was a while back. But yeah, man, I'm super excited to finally, get you on the show. And like I said, French talked highly of you, and I've listened to a lot of your several of your interviews and a few spaces that you're in. But yeah, man, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm so glad that Fringe knows me, and yeah, it's good to be talking to you as well.
She says you have a really brilliant mind, and I agree. I agree. And I just dropped to everybody that's listening. I just dropped another podcast with Philip Kinsella. He has another brilliant mind. He's out of the UK. He explores the dark side of the phenomena, the things that a lot of people don't really like looking into, but it needs to be looked into. How did you, Tom? What was your initial? I hate to say, I don't know, the spark that drove you down this path to understanding, knowledge, truth. Like, what was that moment where you kind of stuck your head in the rabbit hole just to kind of take a look?
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's been a steady buildup ever since I was born, because when I was a kid, I had a lot of paranormal experiences. I had alien abductions, like the classic gray alien abductions. I had demon encounters, and my mom too, because my mom, she was very intuitive, and her mom was a psychic in Singapore. So I kind of come from a lineage of people that have intuitive or psychic powers. So I think that partly drew the paranormal to me. And so when I was a kid, I had all these paranormal experiences, but at the same time, my dad, being an engineer, he also showed me a lot of science stuff. So he would do experiments and show, I mean, because he was a nerd as a kid too, you know. So he had like this science experiment kids or kits. And my grandparents, they bought me like a chemistry set. So in my room, my little table in my room as a kid looked like a meth lab with all the flasks and chemicals spilled everywhere. And I'm surprised I didn't set the place on fire. But the point is, I was super curious about the world and how everything worked. And at the same time, I had these paranormal experiences that were extremely scary and couldn't really be explained, right? So this paradox between normality, trying to figure things out, and this other component to my life, that's sort of what drove me to look for answers. But see, here's the thing: I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was just a kid. Uh, and when you're a kid, I mean, you don't have a standard of comparison necessarily, so you accept things more than you would if it started happening to you as an adult.
Mhm.
And so therefore, I didn't really start looking into it until I was about 12 or 13, and I learned that I could read entire books, because up to that point, I wasn't really reading. So then I started reading all the books in my local library, and that's when, all the metaphysics, UFO science, metaphysics books. So once I got into that, then the picture started expanding, and everything kind of evolved from there. And I've had different breakthrough moments over the years, like certain groups or people that I've networked with that shared with me some very interesting knowledge and experiences. So then over the years, after I put my website out, I started communicating with more and more people and more high level researchers, until over the years I've gotten maybe, I don't know, like 3,000 abductees and experiencers that I've talked to,
Mhm.
and also like 20 or 30,000 other people that just asked me questions or shared with me their personal anomalous experiences that they couldn't explain. So I'm at a point now in life where I have this huge database, I guess, in my head, and also a little bit on my computer and notebooks and such, where I can start connecting dots more and more. And so on my website or in my books, for example, or my YouTube videos, those are like distillations of what I have figured out based on all of this over the past 20 or 30 years.
So you have a lot of material on your website, montalk.net, montalk.net. It'll be in the description and also be within the the video form also on the thumbnail. But if you had to pick one before we get into some of the things we're going to talk about, if you had to get into one particular area that you're more focused on right now, and or you think is more concerning for just I don't know, just the future of mankind, or whatever topic do you think that we need to be focused on like right now? I guess it all to me fits in the spider's web. It all to me, it all interconnects, intertwines. That's why I do conspiracies and paranormal podcasts. Um, but what do you think it is? What is reality, the dark side of the phenomena, ancient mysteries? What are you mostly focused on, and is that um I guess an important topic that you think that more people need to look into?
Become a member on Patreon to get full access to all exclusive content. A few of the perks is the full-length ad-free video version of the interviews, face-to-face interviews, bonus shows, and behind-the-scenes footage. You will also receive the video interview way in advance before the audio-only interview gets dropped on all platforms. Sign up and become a member today for only $3 a month. The link is in the description.
I would actually say it's all three of those, but if I had to pick just one, I would say it is the dark side of the phenomenon because, so here's the reason. See, pretty much everyone listening, you and me, and I mean, a lot of people, we have good hearts. We want to do well. We want to pursue the truth and basically live in a better humanity, right? So we have good
Mhm.
hearts. But here's the thing, if you have a good heart, but you don't have knowledge of potential deceptions or trickery, then it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? I mean, you mean well, but you can get led down some very dark paths if you're not careful. For example, you might have someone who wants sort of a utopian golden age for humanity, okay? And that's what they secretly want deep down. And then they might come across some group online that says, hey, we're going out into the desert and we're flashing lights up into the sky and doing meditations and we're trying to communicate with these wonderful space brothers that are up in the sky. And maybe if we can make contact, then we can start opening the door towards contact between humanity at large and these alien groups that are up there. And maybe they can guide us into this golden age that I secretly wish for. Well, that sounds good, but I mean, that ignores like 90% of the actual phenomenon, which is not good. There's a component which is, yeah, definitely positive, but there's so many other traps that you have to go through before you can actually get to the genuine positive, that if you try to do that, what I just said, like do this, they call it CE5, meaning
Yeah.
close encounters of the fifth kind.
Hmm.
If you do that without being aware of the potential pitfalls, then you're actually opening the door to some very dark forces. And dark forces, not it's not that when they contact you, they come at you like scary demons or something. It's not like that. It's more like con artists, where they come at you with a smile, with love bombing, with acceptance. But what you don't know is that they're cleaning out your bank account. In this case, bank account being the future of humanity itself. Like basically, you're selling out your own species, your own planet, to forces that you don't comprehend because you've got this naivete that is underlying your good intentions. So that's why I think the dark side of the phenomenon, as depressing as it can be to some people, it's important for securing a positive future, ironically.
My thing is, Tom, I'm afraid that I've never even messed with a Ouija board. My thing is, why do I want to lure something in? And you're right. Yes, there's many different variables, facets, faces to this phenomena. It's not just all dark, but that is an important part of it, though, because people don't like to look into it. So I think it needs to be looked into. But why do I want to conjure something like a spaceship, craft, UFO, like CE5? Why do I want to lure something in? Because I'm afraid that something may latch onto me, like
Yeah.
subconsciously or whatever. It could be some type of archon type mind parasite, or some type of thought form that the group mind collective like conjured within our subconscious. I don't know. To me, that's just a scary kind of avenue road to go down.
hmm Yeah, I mean, you can be wary for two reasons. One is you're wary just in a general sense, like you were just talking about, like what if it's this or what if it's that,
Hmm.
and that's definitely legit. And then you can also be wary about it based on like a lot of research and experience, where there's something funny going on with that phenomenon that you don't want to mess with. So I think in either camp, yeah, you're definitely you're definitely kind of wary of it. It's kind of like that meme with the bell curve, right? And you've got the dumb guy on the left and the really super smart guy on the right, and the average guy in the middle. The average guy in the middle is like, hey, let's welcome our space brothers. And but then both ends are like, heck no, let's be a little more careful with it. So, but for different reasons.
Mhm. So let's go to the dimensions real fast, real quick. So my thing is, if malevolent, because you talk about a lot of things, Tom. That's what it. Well, before I ask you this, but that's one thing that I think we have a lot of specialists in the field, either whether it be conspiracies or the paranormal, but there's not a whole lot of brilliant minds that really tackle a lot of material. Yes, Nick Redfern tackles a lot of material, of course, you and so many others. But imagine like somebody, I'm making an example like Stanton Friedman, he had a brilliant mind. I didn't, agree with everything he says, but he had a brilliant mind. Imagine if he was open minded enough to open up other doors to the phenomena. You know what I mean? But people get lockstepped into a certain narrow point of view, and it makes it gives your vision, your mind, like an opaque vision, I guess, of the phenomena. It's like you're kind of tunnel vision on what your path is, and I feel like a lot of people. But anyways, we'll break it down. I want need more people to look at every aspect and variable of the phenomena instead of just one. I know it's good to have specialists into a certain particular whatever Roswell or whatever it is, but we need more brilliant minds to tackle it all. But with malevolent ETs, Tom, that come from the fourth and fifth dimension, I guess. How does that work if most of the ETs, to our knowledge, do not have souls or that life essence that we do? And these ETs have evolved into dimensions above ours. It just puzzles me how these soulless ETs have evolved beyond our 3D 5 sense reality.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. And when you talk about the soulless types of ETs, I think most people, when they think about that, they think about the Greys, for example. Because I mean, the Greys, it's just like pawns on a chessboard in a sense that they're out in front, and they're also small and bald, just like the pawns are. Funny enough,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean. But so they're out there. But personally, based on my research and my experiences from when I interacted with them as a kid. See, so as a kid, I called them well, in German I called them the stone men or the gray men, but I called them the stone men because not only were they gray like stone, but they also seemed slightly inanimate, like they were inorganic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like moving statues. That's how I perceived them when I was a kid, because their energy wasn't like your mom or your dad or your friends or even your pet cat or dog. It wasn't like that. It was literally like an animated statue. So that's what my little kid intuition was picking up on. And the reason why that is because even though they might be made of biological tissues and DNA, ultimately I think that they are artificial creations, like genetically engineered, cybernetic, probably got some nanotechnology or something in them that makes them not fully living creatures in the way that we would think, with a full soul, with a full spirit,
Kind of what
full consciousness.
Nigel Kerner talks about.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes. So if you have, I don't even want to call them a species, but if you have a product like that, like the grays, and there's many different types of grays, right? Some are way more robotic than others. And the reason why that is because you can take your very basic pure gray, which is almost like a cybernetic biological android in a way, and you can take its DNA set and cross it with other species, whether it's humans or mantid aliens or reptilian aliens. Actually, as a kid, I did see a hybrid between a gray and a reptilian, and I know a few other people that have seen the same creature, whatever it is. But point being, they can hybridize it, and so that's why you might get grays that seem a little bit more human-like or less robotic than others, is because they've been bred or crossed with something else which is more real, like a human being. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the quintessential gray, I don't think they are their own species. I don't think that they like evolved on some planet, because even they have told some of their abductees and contactees a kind of disinformation line, which is that they were their own civilization, or that they are actually us in the future. So they're actually future humans, and that either their civilization or our civilization went through a kind of nuclear global disaster, and therefore they had to go underground. And because it's so dark underground, I guess they didn't have lights, right? But because it was so dark underground, their eyes evolved to be really big, and that's why they look the way they do. All pale with like the dark, big black eyes and small stature because they're crawling around underground. I mean, I think that's a BS story because it doesn't really square with a lot of other data that I have. So, I mean, these beings, whether it's Greys or some of these other ET types, they're known for generating false histories about who they actually are and why they're here. Okay. And the reason we know it's false is because they all contradict one another. So it's almost like they've got maybe like 12 or 24 different storylines that they generate and that they feed to different abductee groups. And I'm not the first person who's come up with this observation, which is that they come up with different storylines, they feed them to different contactee or abductee groups in order to create no real consensus amongst the abduction or contactee field in terms of what they actually are. So it creates like a smokescreen for their true nature and their true agenda. So that's why people are fighting about, no, the Greys are good, no, the Greys are bad, no, they're real, no, they're robots, right? There's a lot of confusion and disinformation there. So the truth gets buried in all of that noise, and that's strategically beneficial for them to maintain their cover. So back to your question about how is it that they can be in what seems like other dimensions, even though they seem lower than us in consciousness? Well, the reason is because there's two different scales. Okay, there's a scale of actual conscious spiritual evolution, and then there's another scale of, I guess you could call it, biological sophistication or mental psychic sophistication. And one thing you'll notice, if you know anyone who's psychic, not everyone who is psychic is necessarily a saintly or a good person. See, psychic powers and your spiritual evolution, they're not exactly the same thing. I mean, you can be someone who is very manipulative, even narcissistic, a messed up person, but you're born with psychic gifts, right? So you're able to read people, and maybe you might use that gift to manipulate people. Like some people do that. They're almost like psychic sociopaths. Mm-hmm. And then there's others who have psychic powers, but they're also like really good people as well, right? So psychic doesn't necessarily mean spiritually evolved. And the same thing with these beings, and that whether they were artificially engineered by something that is super psychic and super like other dimensional or not, it's possible to become that way without necessarily being higher in consciousness. So there are two different independent scales. So, I mean, if you think about it, when you hear stories about the government or the military doing remote viewing projects or MK Ultra with mind control, for example, those projects, a lot of them, or some of them, they were geared towards developing psychic powers, whether they admit it or not. And so you can imagine that if that went on for multiple centuries, you might even have specially bred humans, or maybe there wouldn't even be human by that point, who have extremely advanced psychic powers, maybe even to the point where they can do invisibility or shift themselves into some parallel space-time that we can't see. But they're still part of the government and the military, right? They're not necessarily part of, I don't know, like some Eastern Buddhist temple where they're training in meditation. I mean, that's a whole different path, right? So you can reach high levels of what seems like occult powers, even other dimensional powers, without necessarily being a higher in spiritual sophistication.
Well said. And you kind of answered a little bit what I was going to ask you next. I feel like these ETs, rather Greys or whomever, they really, I'm not saying maybe all, but maybe a good chunk, haven't really evolved naturally into higher dimensions above ours. I think some of the dark ETs have maybe learned over the eons how to surpass, let's say, the code within the matrix by transmogrifying or rewriting the code, for lack of a better term, to help them evolve unnaturally by skipping the natural laws of the universe.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, you said it really well there. So there are like hackers, whether they are real users of the system or whether they are mere products of the system, right?
Can I specify real fast, Tom? Let me specify.
Sure.
People that's listening, I don't think it's like a computer that we live in, but everything is ones and zeros. Everything is algorithmic. Everything. This reality is much more complex than the Matrix or a computer game can ever give us a reference to. But go ahead, man.
Yeah, actually, you know what? We should probably get into the idea of reality and possibly what it is actually, and then we can kind of circle back onto the alien phenomenon because a lot of that explains a lot about the alien phenomenon, if you're okay with that.
Go ahead, man. So I guess you lead us, and then I will follow with some follow up questions.
Okay. So the question, what is reality? And some people they want to approach it merely from a religious viewpoint or a philosophical viewpoint. But I would say, a lot of that is just speculation and you can't really verify it. So how about if we do it empirically? If we look at our experiences and see what we can tell from that, okay? Now, if I look at my own experiences, I see two aspects to reality. On the one hand, I see that there are very rigid rules here. Like if I go to sleep and I wake back up, my room is still the same as it was the day before, as far as I remember. And I don't have to be paying attention to something in order for it to still exist in some form. Okay. And I've studied physics. I did physics and electrical engineering in college. So I know about physics and how the mathematical laws that have been discovered through physics, they're still valid and you can still do experiments. And yeah, the speed of light is still the speed of light, right? So there's a lot about this reality that is it seems almost programmed in the sense that it is very rigidly put in place. There's rules, there's functions, there's algorithms to the way physics works. And then so that creates the perception that reality is solid, that this is real. This is real. You can knock on a wall, you can knock on a wall and it feels real. But here's the thing: at the same time, you also have things like synchronicities, signs, and omens. You can manifest using your imagination and your subconscious wishes. Those things influence reality as well. Not to mention the whole paranormal side of things, or psychic abilities, or people bending spoons with their minds. So there's that as well. How do you reconcile those two things? Because those are two totally contradictory principles to reality. Because, see, here's the thing: if you can bend a spoon with your mind, if you can attract a particular opportunity or item or money or whatever using the powers of manifestation as they do in the New Age field, then shouldn't you, in theory, then be able to influence reality completely? Like, why is it that if a person gets put in prison, they can't get out of prison? Like what? So that indicates that reality is real, but at the same time, they can also track synchronicities, right? So it seems to me that there are two conflicting principles here at work in reality, where reality has one half, which is almost like left brain in the sense of being programmed, and then like right brain in the sense of being like symbolic, meaningful, associated with emotions and purpose and all the cool like spiritual stuff. And so what I concluded is probably that reality very fundamentally, and pretty much East and West, the mystics and the scientists in both feel like the best of the best, they've said the same thing, that reality is fundamentally consciousness. But I mean, when you say that, sure, that may be true, but at the same time, you have to have a lot of nuance about that to understand. Okay, well, then how do you explain everything being so freaking solid, and persistent? How do you explain that? Well, so if you have a universal field of consciousness, let's say you're just one being floating in the middle of nowhere, and you're having a dream. Okay, so you're in this dream space. Now, in this dream space, you're like a god. You have total control over it. So then, what if another being comes along, or you split yourself into two beings, and now each of those beings, with their own free will, is joining into the same dream? Well, now in that case, well, if you try to do something in the dream that the other one doesn't want, maybe that results in you encountering some sort of resistance. Maybe their psychic, their mental energy is preventing you from changing the dream 100% how you want. Now, if you split yourself again or another person comes in, then now you've got more minds, right? So the more minds you join into this collective dream, the more solid it becomes, in the sense that if you try to change part of it and it doesn't uh, fit what all the others want, then it's not going to change. So what if our reality right now, if you want to boil it down very, very, very simply, what if reality is essentially a collective thought construct made of
Mhm.
consciousness, but because we're all plugged into it, we're all sort of binding each other? And that makes a lot of sense, but you have to take it one step further, because when you're in a dream, okay, when you're in a dream, it's not just you that's making the dream. It's another part of you. It's your subconscious that is generating the dream. And then you then are just like the player or the witness or the character in the dream going around it. You're kind of going around your own thought space. But it's not just imagination, it's something else that's kind of holding it in place. So what I'm trying to say is, it's not just that we are all plugged into the same dream, like keeping each other in check. It's also that there is a kind of collective subconscious. All of our subconsciouses, and not just humans, but all life in existence, has we're plugged into something that is independent of us, that is generating this reality and holding us in its psychic grip, so that mentally we can't necessarily tweak reality however we want, because it is presenting some kind of resistance or inertia or persistence or memory or the laws of physics that hold things in place, even though it is consciousness and you are consciousness and we're all consciousness, right? There's another principle here. And that is what the ancient Greeks called the demiurge. So the demiurge, they defined it as essentially it's almost like in a video game when you've got your graphics card generating the video game environment. So the demiurge is kind of like the GPU or graphics card of existence, and that it renders the code into reality as we perceive it. And so when you're in a game and you try to go through a wall, but you can't go through the wall, well, it's because the game has been programmed to not allow you to do that. So the wall isn't really there, but it's a principle, or it's a function that has been coded into it that makes it seem like you can't go through it. And that is enforced by the rules of the game through the demiurge. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to say is, it is sort of like a simulation, but not really, because when you say simulation, as you said earlier, we're not really talking about a computer with ones and zeros. We're not talking about some sort of physical hardware that we're kind of mentally connected to. We're talking more about something that is purely metaphysical or occult or esoteric. Okay, it's something made of consciousness, made of conscious energies. And if you want to get technical, for any of you people listening who know about like esoteric terms, the demiurge it's actually what you would call a thought form or a tulpa or an egregore. Okay. Now, what these things are, they are essentially non-physical mental constructs that are made of astral energy and etheric energy. And those are two forms of subtle energy. You know, we don't have to go into the technicalities of how they differ from each other, but they're two forms of subtle energy that are associated with thoughts, life force energy, conscious energy, emotions, you know, like Lush energy for you guys who know about Robert Monroe's Lush theory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's made of the subtle life force energy, and that is the matrix code that generates reality. So we are immersed in this etheric / astral energy field, and that field itself essentially is the demiurge. It is the projector, the renderer, the GPU code of GPU hardware of this reality, and we're all plugged into it, experiencing this world as essentially a video game environment, but it's an environment that's not generated digitally or electronically, but etherically and astrally. That's pretty much the bottom line of what I currently think reality might be.
Well said, Tom. So do you think that maybe life here on Earth, I guess, and maybe elsewhere, were either created by the creators, the gods, or whoever the creators are, or maybe the life here on Earth was genetically altered to to and tampered with to act like the battery, like Morpheus mentions in the Matrix. And as our soul or consciousness, which is pure energy, created like a plant spirit form that these gods or ETs or whatever label you want to choose can come in and harvest our essence, our energy, and our consciousness, almost like a farmer would harvest its crops. You know, cartoon movies like Monsters Inc. portrays that also.
Yeah, so when you're talking about energy harvesting, we have to look at what is
I
the
bring that up
motivation.
because I think it kind of connects to all of this.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I'd agree. So, in order to understand some of the alien agendas, to understand maybe the origins of human life on Earth, we do have to talk about this energy harvesting idea. And it's not completely theoretical, because even in your own life, maybe you've known people in life who were psychic vampires, whether you know it or whether they knew it or not. In other words, there are people who absorb energy from others around them, and they become more awake, more alive, while the other people around them become more and more tired or more sickly, you know, if you're actually living with them a long time. So there are people in our lives, and also there are occult practices, and you can look up videos on YouTube on how to do this, where people professionally are energy vampires. They vampire energy off living things, whether it's innocent things like trees or plants or uh, animals, humans, And if you get up to the very high levels, that's when you get into the weird, sick, elite stuff where they sacrifice children and other
Mhm.
people, and absorb the life force energies. So that's all part of the same spectrum, right? So when we talk about certain non-human intelligences, whether we would call them demons or the more physical ones, which we will call certain negative aliens, some of them seem to be involved in that exact same process of harvesting energy from us. So then the question is, well, why do they even need to do that? And I think that the best theory that I have is that a lot of these beings, they are either cut off from the true source of this life force energy, which comes into this illusory construct from outside of it. So for example, if you have a being that is a product of this illusion, okay, almost like an NPC in a way. All right, so a
Mhm.
non-playable character. If they're a product of this illusion, they're not going to have the same. They're not going to have their own independent uplink to the universal, I guess you call it, source or God, which is the true source of life force energy. I mean, because that is the energy that generates everything. I mean, that's why they call it life force energy, because it generates life. It generates authentic existence within this illusion, even if you're from outside the illusion. All right. So, point being that whether you are a so-called NPC or whether you are a real being who has simply gone off the path so much that you've shut down your spiritual connection to source, either way, you're not going to have the energy that you need in order to exist in a way that's fulfilling to you, that fulfills your perceived purpose, right? So, um, if you're one of those, your only recourse might be to harvest energy from others who are still plugged into source, and that's what we are. That's what humans are, generally speaking. So, if energy vampires in your own life can do it, what if you have dark beings who, over eons, have learned that they can take over planets or even artificially engineer an entire race of beings and then invite actual true spirits and souls into those bodies and therefore run the entire show as a kind of energy harvesting mechanism? So, in other words, they would have to engineer bodies and civilizations or planets that are attractive enough to real souls and real consciousness from outside this illusory construct, that they would come in here, occupy those bodies, and then they can be fed upon energetically. So, it's really no different from like the home construction industry, where you build neighborhoods, you build houses, and you make them attractive enough that people want to move into them. And once they move into them, now you can either rent it to them or, sell the house and make money that way. So it's like that. It's like that kind of economy, but more of an occult energy based level instead of just material, physical, financial based.
You mentioned NPCs, and I've always been interested in the topic of reincarnation, and try to bring it into the lexicon of this research. I guess when it comes to the dark side of phenomena, why are we here, reality, etc. But if let's just fathom the idea that we are in this endless loop of this reincarnation harvesting trap of our consciousness or whatever, maybe whatever for whatever reason we just keep coming back. Maybe that's why there might actually be these NPCs, non-player characters, in this artificial like reality, is because these non-player characters have come back or reincarnated so many times to where they are burnt out deep within their subconscious minds from all the endless looping of being reincarnated for thousands of years. That plays a trauma. That's a lot of trauma on the human soul consciousness, deep within the subconscious, and that maybe these non-player characters couldn't handle the load anymore, to where their spirit battery just doesn't have any more juice left, and they walk around this reality like a soulless, lifeless zombie.
Yeah, and that sort of happens within one lifetime as well. If someone goes through enough trauma, or maybe sometimes it's not even trauma. Sometimes it is just pure boredom or like a mechanical routine in life, doing the same thing over and over again, day after day after day. Your soul just ends up dying in a way. So sometimes people here, they check out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
some people check out, and I've heard of cases like that, and I think I've known personally cases like that where all that's left behind is kind of like a shell of their former selves. But it's not a shell in the sense of like someone who's been to war and they come back and they're literally shell shocked, like, staring off into space, not responsive. It's not like that. I mean, they still walk, they still talk, they can still do their jobs, but they're on repeat mode. So there's nothing new that ever happens to them, in terms of personal growth or noticing new things or having new interests. It's almost like they're frozen in time, and now they're just perpetuating their programming from when their true consciousness kind of checked out. So now they're just like hollow shells essentially. And at that point, yes, just on a pure functional sense, you would probably call them an NPC because they sure act like it. And I mean, they have no spark of originality. And even if you look into their eyes, you can tell that there's something missing. Like if you have an intuitive ability, you can
Mhm.
tell that there's something missing. So, and if you've known them long enough, you might notice how, yeah, sure, earlier in life they had that spark of realness in their eyes, but beyond a certain point, maybe something happened to them, or years just kind of ground them down. And beyond that point, then therefore they're no longer real how they used to be, right? But there are also cases where people, even from the time they're born, even as a baby or as a toddler, you could tell that there's something missing in them. Now, in some cases, when those types undergo trauma, there is nothing real within them to counter the negative effects of trauma. There's nothing in them that can redeem it or use it for good or use it as a springboard for personal growth. And so therefore those types end up usually becoming extreme narcissists or psychopaths or sociopaths, depending on what type of trauma and neglect that they had undergone in those early years, right? So there are basically two types of NPCs as far as I could tell. There's ones that, like you said, they're real people that just kind of checked out, but their body and their mind, their intellect is still living, but their spirit is kind of gone. And then you have others who seem to probably not have even had one from the very start. Like maybe, see, because here's the thing, biology doesn't really care if you have a higher consciousness or not. All that biology cares about is that you have a very basic life force energy field, which we would call the etheric body or the astral body. And as long as there's that, then you can still have a walking, talking, functioning human being who can be relatively successful in life in terms of finance and starting a family and all that, reproducing, but not necessarily have this higher spark of consciousness or higher spark of spirit that can defy the matrix programming, that can defy uh, deterministic influences from society, from biology, from evolutions. And so that's why we call them NPCs, because there's no real player that is operating them and making them act in a surprising kind of way. I mean, because the whole point of NPCs in a video game is that they follow the programming that the game wants them to follow in order to kind of push the game narrative, right? Because if you have this massive online multiplayer game and it's nothing but real players, well, then it's very easy for those real players to kind of take over the game and not follow the scripting that the game programmers had in mind, right? But if you have 90% NPCs in the game, but only 10% real people, then you've got enough padding in there that the game can evolve different narratives at certain times that are programmed, and therefore the real people can't really mess that up. So I do think that NPCs definitely serve a function in the sense of keeping consensus reality in check, keeping it going, and making sure that things are on track. Like the tracks of a train. It keeps it literally on track. And I think that NPCs serve the same function. However, because they don't have a lot of volition or sentience within them, they're easily manipulable by other forces, and they could be physical forces or non-physical. I mean, physical forces like obviously like school programming and government and media, politicians. I mean, they're very easily swayed by those kinds of influences. But I'm also talking about occult influences, whether it's
Mhm.
demonic energies or negative alien stuff. They can also operate through these semi-empty vessels in order to steer or to hijack the narrative, right? So I think that's the sort of situation that we find ourselves in, especially nowadays. If you just look at the news and the level of insanity, especially in the West and America and Europe, because you don't really find it as much in like Russia or China because they're authoritarian places that don't put up with that BS. But yeah, especially here, you find a lot of these people out there that are so, I mean, we call them NPCs because they follow the media programming like wind up robots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't have the spark of something to question the narrative ever, to introspect, to have empathy, to see beyond the two false choices that they're given, right? So, point being that yes, NPCs, I think they do exist. There's different types, and they're being used for nefarious purposes because they don't have a lot of their own free will or the capacity to think for themselves.
I've got to get you back on just to talk about more in depth, because I've been pulling up some previous notes that I've had that I really haven't talked about, this reality and everything. But I do want to bridge into the gap with these ETs, maybe some of the uh, famous occultists like Crowley, Parsons, so many others, and maybe the elites, maybe that are tying in or working alongside, rather consciously or subconsciously, with the dark side. But do you think that this reality though is manufactured to keep us in a lower vibrational state that uh, which hence keeps a large collective of the human race in? Well, it makes it easier for these entities to manifest themselves from the other side through us, almost like we are the beacon and or portal for these entities to travel into this reality. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you're talking about that somewhat from a more collective perspective, and I would say that the same applies also individually in a personal perspective. Because here's the thing: if you're someone who lives in a haunted house, or if you're someone who lives in a house where maybe you've brought home an entity from someplace else, like I don't know, like a cemetery or some sort of nightclub or something where there's a lot of people around that might be entity possessed. If you take one of those entities home with you, it can infect your home, and what it will do is it will take some of its own negative energy and it will start pumping it into that space. So it could be your bedroom, it could be your living room, wherever you spend the most time. It's going to start pumping that space with its own negative toxic energy in order to make it more comfortable for its own existence. Because if you don't have that, then the entity, because the entity is non-physical, so it might have a tendency to bleed or lose its energy. And so therefore, if it can make it kind of like more comfy, more terraformed, then it can roam around your home more easily and do what it does. But point being that it's going to not only start sapping your life force energy, because that's what these entities do, but it's also going to start trying to manipulate your mind, your emotions, your beliefs, trying to get you to generate more of that energy that it feeds upon, whether it's lust, hatred, anger, depression, whatever, all those negative emotions. They generate a kind of energy that these entities feed on, depending on what kind of entity it is, right? But the more your home gets saturated with this negative energy, the more real the entity becomes. So eventually, very, very initially, maybe you might just barely sense a presence in your home. But over time, you might start feeling things on your body. Maybe it starts biting you or scratching you or poking you. Okay. You'll start getting nightmares. You start getting more depressed, getting obsessive thought loops that have been put into your head by this telepathic entity. And the more this continues, the more you and the entity begin to entangle, like psychically entangle, quantum entangle, and its reality becomes your reality, and vice versa. So therefore, at some point, you might actually start seeing the being, almost as if you're some sort of schizophrenic having a hallucination, but you're not. You're literally dealing with an occult entity that's becoming increasingly real because you have fed into it and you've made it stronger, and it has contaminated or polluted not only your environment but also your inner environment, meaning your thoughts and your emotions, with its influences, with its energies, with its sort of negative beliefs that it's trying to program into you. So take that example, okay? Take that example and extrapolate it up to the planetary level. Well, you can imagine on a planetary scale that the more people slide into darkness, into depression, into depravity and war, right? The more that happens, the more it feeds these entities, the more that they can do to create even more suffering on Earth. So you can imagine a time period where things on Earth become so hellish, and maybe there's just so much bloodshed that these entities can actually materialize for real and penetrate into the physical realm enough in order to maybe take this place by force. And I mean, I'm partly speculating here, but it's speculation based on real life experience too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something you consider, that these things aren't necessarily 100% from our physical reality. It's not like your neighbor or the person that works at the grocery store down the street. They're not in a reality like that. They're sort of in a parallel realm of existence. And in order for them to come here and be as physical as us, there has to be a kind of entangling process or an entrainment process. between their reality and your reality. And so, as I said, not only do they have to contaminate our external environment, but they also have to pollute our internal environment in terms of our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, the collective beliefs, collective emotional energies and root assumptions about reality is. And so that's why, I've heard a couple of different people say that one of the many different reasons why powers that be do not want alien disclosure, in other words, they don't want humanity to know that aliens exist, is because if people did realize that they exist and began obsessing over it and started investing it with their mental and emotional energies, it might actually empower these entities to fully cross over into this world and become fully tangible here, on a permanent basis. And that would be very bad because then that would allow a full-fledged alien invasion. So that's an interesting idea, maybe that is the case, and maybe it's not the case, but it's definitely an idea to consider.
And just like you said, we have the power, deep within our subconscious or conscious minds to manifest things or these beings, whether it be non-human entities or other paranormal beings into existence. Basically, we are, you could say, collectively or whatever, the co-creators of this reality, like we've already talked about. But the thing is, what or who planted the seed of the modern gray alien to our subconscious minds, or maybe other entities, not have to just be the gray, to where we would manifest things into reality? Was it maybe Crowley and other dark occultists like Jack Parsons that utilized the alchemical process through rituals, in which in return we manifest these once ritualistic incantations into our reality and or modern day lexicon? Also, with that being said, are we the pawns that are utilized in this reality to build and shape this reality into the likeness of these occultists or entities? Rather it be the elites of the world, Crowley, Parsons, or other occultists that use these rituals to transmogrify this reality into their likeness that they wish to bestow upon the world,
Right. And so what you're getting into there is the idea that you have people with advanced knowledge, maybe even advanced technology, and they had an idea of how to use that power to control humanity. Now, some of them want to reshape it in their own image, and maybe they're sociopaths or psychopaths, or maybe they are agents of the dark side, so they want to turn Earth into a living hell, for example. But then at the same time, you also have others who are actually extremely benevolent. You would call them positive secret societies, or you could call them, I don't know, like living human agents of the divine or of the Christ intelligence or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is there appears to be, just as in any human organization, whether it's schools or government or military, you have the more well-meaning ones, the more pro-human ones, and then you've got the other ones that are almost like anti-human in the sense that they have an ideology that is, you could call it psychopathic or demonic in a way, right? So you got this duality amongst pretty much all organizations within human society. And I think the same thing also applies to some of these occult groups or secret society groups, in that you do have the more positive ones, and then you also have the more negative ones. And like Jack Parsons and Crowley, of course, they were in the more like left-hand path side of it all. So they were trying to open portals and bring chthonic beings, demonic beings, into this reality through these magical workings, as they called them, as that they were doing.
Or the Babylon
But
working.
yeah, Babylon workings. Yeah. So that's one of them. So these magical workings, these occult workings that they're doing, yes, they are. Basically, when they do these rituals, so what rituals actually are, rituals are forms of not only hacking the matrix code, but also a form of contract signing. It's like when you write up a contract in the legal world and you have someone sign it, well, now it's become a binding contract. So a ritual, in a way, is like typing out all the legalese and then signing it with your name. That's what you're doing when you're doing a ritual. And so much of our reality has to do with free will and permission and contracts. And the reason why that is because in a reality that is made of consciousness, the only thing that's really binding, is agreements, free will and agreements between entities. That is what generates collective consensus shared realities. That is what causes one entity to enter the mind space of another and be held in place by it. So, for example, when you, as a consciousness from outside of this construct, comes into this construct and is now bound by your body, bound by the laws of physics, you gave away part of your free will to be here. And so that's why right now, even if you choose, you're unable to, I don't know, like walk through a wall or levitate an object or, you know, become invisible. It's because you haven't yet accessed the authority level of the permission needed to undo the original choice you made in order to come here and buy and obey these laws of physics. So point being that when these rituals are done, they're entering into agreements with other beings from other realms, and that agreement then that acts as a kind of quantum entanglement or entrainment process, allowing the other being to merge with your reality and to come here and kind of like bind with you in your reality. So what Parsons and Crowley were doing is they were opening a kind of portal, not only a physical portal, but also a kind of legal permissions-based conduit, I guess you could say, or contract with these beings that allowed them to come here and to do things here that they otherwise wouldn't have. Now, that doesn't mean that they have 100% free reign here, because it's not like humanity as a whole gave away the free will to have these entities come here. It was only Crowley, Parsons, and the other people that they were working with. But see, they were only one of many such people that were doing this kind of thing. So it's not to say that the entire modern day gray alien phenomenon owes itself entirely to Crowley and Parsons.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't think that's 100% correct. I think that they merely put a little pinprick in the veil, I guess, that the bubble that surrounds this reality. So they pricked it a little bit. So you have certain kinds of entities coming here to some extent, but there were many other pinpricks that have happened over time, including, for example, contracts and deals that our own government, our own military, I mean, really the shadow military and the shadow government, but the deals that they made with some of these non-human intelligences. See, because that is happening at a much more official level. And so therefore, that sort of permission giving carries more weight than what just Crowley and Parsons were doing. So you can add that to the mix. You can add the whole collusion between our shadow government and these non-human intelligences that allowed them to come here and do things much more than they would otherwise. So, one of the popular lores within ufology is that, so back in the day, during the Truman and Eisenhower administrations, the government was actually making active deals with some of these aliens, essentially, like certain alien factions they were making deals with. And part of the deal is that these aliens would give them intelligence and technology in exchange for the government looking the other way when these beings then would start abducting American citizens. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sort of thing, that is permission giving on the highest degree, because it's literally our leadership. I mean, even if they're not elected, they're still sort of indirectly our leadership. It's our leadership giving away our rights to these dark beings. And in the grand scheme of things, that counts for something. It might not be 100% like permission giving, but it might be like, let's say, 70%. And that is enough for the modern abduction phenomenon to just explode since the 60s. And that's why since the 60s, we've had so many reports of gray alien abductions and the other beings that are associated with them. It's probably because the military, the shadow government, gave away a big portion of our rights to these beings. And they were the ones that were the major door openers, more so than just Crowley and Parsons. But I would say that even before Crowley and Parsons, if you go back many centuries, you've had other occult groups. And in ancient times, right, you've got the Sumerians and the Egyptians, who were essentially stewards for their respective gods. And these gods weren't truly gods. I mean, they were probably just non-human beings of some sorts, probably aliens or something. So it was happening even back then. So over time, more and more of our permission has been given away to these beings, and they have become increasingly entangled with our reality. And so that's why nowadays we're getting UFO sightings on the increase. That's why the whole disclosure process within government is proceeding more and more at a more rapid pace. So everything is kind of converging upon the singularity of a full penetration of these non-human beings in other realms into this collective reality that we're in right now. And, right now, this very second, sure, when you look outside, you don't necessarily see UFOs flying around. But the thing is, I think we're approaching a time where the veil between realities could be fully ripped away just because so much entanglement and so much entrainment has happened.
And you just connect so many dots with reality also. But I am not of the, I guess, the fan club of everything's love and light. Yes, there is some of that out there. Um, whether it be these entities, these aliens, whatever. But my thing is, before I ask you the next little part of the question, is I think that we kind of talk about how we kind of co-create this reality, but I think these factions, the elites, deep state, whatever you want to call them, they know how to use like mind control and propaganda through Hollywood, the music industry, through the news, and a lot of it is fear based. Now, I don't think everything is all doom and gloom, but I don't think it's all love and light. It's somewhere in between, Um, but they know that they get a reaction, a response when things are fear based, and that drains us. But does that act almost like a thought form to where we manifest things into this reality? Hence, where I'm going with this is, I think Lou Elizondo's new book, where, and not just him, but DC, they're bringing the more the fear based, where we have to protect national security with these UAPs. I prefer UFOs. Um, is that creating like this negative response where they can get a reaction, almost like they're trying to wish a certain type of reaction out of us to create the reality that they want, which is more budget for weaponry and all this other nonsense. Like, I just don't, I'm trying to connect the dot here. I just don't understand what's going on, because yes, I don't think it's all doom and gloom and fear based, but I don't think it's all love and light either. Um, why are they pushing the fear based narrative when it comes to these entities, these UAPs or whatever? And are they trying to get a response out of us? Are they trying to create this mind control, whatever, within our subconscious minds, to where we can manifest their agenda because we can go along with it? You know what I'm saying? It's hard to connect the dots of what's really going on here.
Yeah, see, and the reason why it's confusing is because I think there are multiple agendas, multiple reasons why the what we would perceive as a fear-based agenda is happening. Okay. So I think the main, the main thing people need to understand is that there are sort of like two sides to reality in terms of how our actions and our thoughts and beliefs affect reality, right? So on the one hand, you have, I guess you could call it physical determinism, where, like for example, if you're going to go on a long road trip, it's a good idea to put your seatbelt on, to have, relatively not bald tires, to put air in your tires, because there are physical causes that can, well, like, if you get into an accident, your head's going to go through the windshield, you're going to end up like 50 yards away from your car because you don't have your seatbelt on. And that's all physical stuff. So sometimes you have to take physical measures in order to offset physical threats. And those have really nothing to do with our thoughts, our beliefs in terms of manifesting what we attract to us through our vibes and all that. That's like separate from that. That's more dealing with the mechanical side of reality. But then, as you said, there is also the other side where it has to do with probable futures, with beings in other realms that aren't fully here yet. It has to do with that. And that whole thing, like things that are up in the air, things that are not fully locked into physical determinism yet, those things are still up for grabs in terms of how we affect it with our vibes and our beliefs and our energies, right? So you got the more mechanical side of things, like the dominoes falling, and then you got the other side, which is more like law of attraction, quantum entrainment, quantum entanglement, that sort of thing. So when we have people in the military or the government, or like people like Lou Elizondo and others, pushing or publicizing the fear or threat narrative, is it solely because of the whole like law of attraction thing, like trying to induce fear so that we kind of pull it into our reality? Or is it more of the mechanical side of it, where they're talking about things that are here to some extent, that are physical to some extent, and therefore those are physical threats that have to be mitigated through physical action, physical awareness, and so on. And my answer, sorry, there's like a big storm happening right now, funny enough.
Kind of brings
So,
to the ambiance to the conversation.
yeah, right, exactly. We're talking about dark things and there's like lightning and thunder going on. Right. So I think it's actually both in the sense that, yes, you have one type of agenda, okay, that is definitely trying to increase, they're trying to push the fear porn to the maximum extent. They're trying to push the alarmism to the maximum extent possible in order to traumatize people and to get them magnetized towards exactly that particular probable future where we are beset upon by powers that we think we can do nothing about, to try to induce like a state of victim mentality in humanity in order to get us desperate and to think that there's nothing we can do, and that then empowers the predatory forces that are kind of coming here. It kind of validates their predatoriness in the collective consciousness, and therefore it kind of puts them on a pedestal or a platform or some sort of a foundation to act upon their predatory qualities in a way that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. Okay, so there's that element of it. But then, as I said, there's also the other element, which is, okay, well, we know just from abduction accounts, contactee accounts, from like the works of David Paulides and his missing 411 cases, for example, that there are things here right now that are causing major harm to people. Not just physical harm, not just permanently abducting them, which means being taken and used for parts, like to put it kindly. But there's also an element of mind control, mind programming, deception, infiltration happening by some of these alien forces. And that is like real. That is part of the mechanical aspect of things. And that has to be made aware of and to be dealt with. So, it's just like in life. If someone tells you, hey, if you're going to go on this road trip, make sure your tires are good, make sure you've got enough, you got an oil change and everything. That's not necessarily fear mongering. Wow, that's a big thunder. It's not necessarily fear mongering. It is just prudence. It is caution. It's using physical action to mitigate a potential bad outcome, right? So you have to have that. And this is the part here that unravels the knot for a lot of people. See, you can be mentally and calmly and strategically aware of a threat without, at the same time, being emotionally invested in it and letting fear run away with you. To have this gnawing fear that you can't get hold of and you're just kind of trapped in this victim mentality and you're kind of obsessing about it. It is that emotional obsession that becomes like a subconscious complex. That is what draws something in vibrationally. That's what draws in to the law of attraction. It is not mere just mental awareness of something that draws it in. It is the emotional component. So if you are objectively, calmly, cool-headedly, strategically aware of a negative thing, then you can take the physical action that you need to in order to mitigate that threat without also having the emotional component that draws it in through the law of attraction. So I think that's what humanity ultimately needs. I think humanity needs an objective, calm, matter-of-fact understanding of the negative alien presence and these other dark powers that are out there, but without the loss of control, the panic, the gnawing fear and paranoia that would draw it in. Now,
do you think there's enough of us? I'm sorry, Tom. Do you think there's enough of us though to where we don't buy into that? Because I see people getting suckered into this trap, the fear based trap. Which again, I love looking into the dark side of phenomena, but I feel like it's one cosmic toolbox that these factions in DC and elsewhere use to push their narratives and agendas though.
right. And, so back in the day when I was first getting into the topic of alien abductions and researching what's really going on, yeah, it really got to me. Like emotionally, I was extremely disturbed. And because of that, for a period of time, I had a very strong increase in not only uh, tangible, in your face alien activity, but also demonic activity and other scary stuff that was happening because I was feeding into it with my own paranoia and my own fear. Like my vibe was kind of getting away from me, and I was sliding to this downward spiral. And I was caught in a kind of runaway negative feedback loop with reality itself, where my own fear projections were giving embodiment to these negative forces that would otherwise be kept away from me more than they were. So I was kind of feeding into it. I was making it worse because I was going through this sort of initiation process of having to go through this fear, this trial by water, I guess, to get to the point where I could be cool, calm, collected, and thinking about it without having that emotional reaction. So here's the thing, because I was an individual in my own home, I had the luxury of going through that process without wrecking the entire world. But what happens when you have alien disclosure on a global scale and people on a global collective level become aware of the alien presence in an official capacity? If they go through the same process that I went through of sliding into fear and paranoia and desperation, then that could extremely empower some of these negative forces.
Mm-hmm.
See, and that's an issue. But these forces are already here to some extent, and they already have to be dealt with. So we were kind of caught between this rock and the hard place of, okay, do we admit that they're real so that we can do something about it on a physical level and, ensure a positive future that way? And if we do, then are we willing to face the risk of humanity kind of going nuts with it and binding themselves with this phenomenon so much that these things can come in a much more tangible and forceful way? So unfortunately, I think humanity will have to go through a gauntlet, because if we don't, then these entities are going to take over our planet anyway through a more covert, subversive, longer range plan. Okay, I think they're going to do it anyway. It'll just take longer. So, and then by the time that happens, it might be too late for us. So we might just have to rip off that Band-Aid and hope that we can provide enough solutions, assurances, defenses, mitigations that people will feel comfortable in knowing that, hey, you know what, maybe we can do something. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there is no reason to become so so paranoid and fearful about it. Or even worse, sometimes it's not just the emotional energy that can draw something in. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, it is a whole like contract or permissions thing. So you can imagine how, what if humanity becomes aware collectively of the alien presence and wishes for it to come in, thinks of them as space brothers, as saviors. Like maybe by that point, maybe things on Earth are not so good due to other reasons, whether it's climate catastrophes or World War III or something. And maybe humans have lost faith in their human leadership and are looking towards something beyond that in order for rescue. So if humanity cries out for rescue from alien beings, and some of them are not good, well, that permissions thing will also allow them to come in much more than they could otherwise, right? So there's really two things we have to watch out for. We have to watch out for the runaway fear and paranoia angle, and we have to watch out for the naive falling for the false alien savior scenario. We have to watch out for those two things. And really the only cure for those two things is full unthrottled truth and understanding, so that we can get ourselves up to speed as rapidly as possible, and therefore outrun or outpace. Wow, that's a big old lightning right there.
I'm really not hearing it too much. I'm sure I can cut a lot of it out through post production, but it's really not too bad on my end though. But like I said, it does bring to the ambiance, man.
Yeah, I guess it's just more distracting to me than anything.
But
I'm trying to, yeah.
So what does your gut tell you? I know you've been doing this for a long time. I have also, roughly around 06, started podcasting since 2010. But what does your gut tell you with all your years of research and knowledge, intellect, and all that? What is the ultimate agenda? I guess it's two part. I'm going to ask you what you think, then I'm going to tell you what I think. But what do you think the ultimate agenda is for the phenomena? You could say the dark side of the phenomena, whatever. You can tie in abductions or tie it to the elites or whatever. But if I had to guess what maybe one, I don't know if it's the ultimate agenda, but a huge variable or ornament, a huge ornament on the tree of that with many other agendas at play is the soul. Now, why? Because what is it with our soul, our essence, that these entities, these aliens or whatever, what do they want? Is that, do you think that, maybe they're working alongside some of these 1%, these elites or 1%ers in the world to push a certain narrative, whether they're working alongside physically or just subconsciously, almost like a parasite, um, to where they're pushing us towards a dystopian type world where human 2.0, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, to where we're plugged in almost like the Matrix as a metaphor, or maybe literally, with we have Neuralink, and that's just now. Imagine what will happen 20, 30, 40 years from now. Do they want us to be fully automated to where we have almost no free will, or where everything's decided for us, where we don't, everything about us, what makes us human is obsolete? Do they want an obsolete human future to where we become almost like plugged into this digitized world so it makes us more hackable? I think that's one of the ultimate goals here with this agenda, not just the entities, but also with the elites of the world. Maybe they're collaborating. Who knows? They want us to be fully automated or plugged into this matrix in the future, this dystopian nightmare world, so that if we're plugged in, just like a computer hacker, we are more easily hackable. But what would they be after? I think it's our soul. Maybe some of these things don't have souls, or if they do, they're they're so burnt out or whatever to where they just can't evolve beyond their on whatever, they just can't evolve into other dimensions, or maybe they want to have a physical experience in this reality like we do. I think that's one of the agendas here at play, is something with the soul.
Yeah, and the question is why is the soul so important to them? Well, if you look at the powers of the soul, of the human soul especially, what is it about it that is so valuable? Okay, so on the one hand, earlier we talked about the whole life force energy aspect of
Mhm.
it, because the soul is the gateway to outside this construct where the source of true life force energy originates. So, if you can control the soul, then you can control that source of energy. You can feed off of it more reliably. Because, in the old days, especially like with ranching and farming and so on, in the old days, the animals were generally kept outside in big open spaces. But then nowadays, unfortunately, we have these corporate factory farms where poor animals are locked into little tiny cages, right? So they can pack as many chickens or cows or pigs or whatever into the smallest space possible. And that is what to maximize the production, to increase efficiency, to reduce costs. And in a way, I think some of these farmers of Earth have the same idea in mind for humanity at large, where if they can get us put into cages, whether physically or just mentally and psychologically and spiritually, then they can harvest our energies way more efficiently than they've ever been able to before. But see, that's not the only power that the soul has. The other power that we've talked about is the power of manipulating reality or attracting certain probable futures just through the powers of the subconscious. Now, if you can control the subconscious of the human, then you can control reality as well. So what they're really after is two things. They're after energy, and they're after control of reality, control of the simulation, using using our own soul, using our own subconscious to do that. And the reason why that matters is because as much technology and psychic ability as they might have, as much as they can like do little tweaks to space time here and there, I think they are prevented by the rules of this illusion from doing certain things. Okay, they're barred from accessing certain realities, are barred from manipulating certain aspects of reality by themselves. But if they can get a hold of us, then they can manipulate those areas, those non-accessible areas, through us, thereby expanding their control. So in a way, they are very parasitic in that sense, almost like a psychoactive parasite, in that they're trying to take control of our minds, of our souls, in order to use us as energy sources and also as manipulation probes or tactics or pincers for manipulating aspects of reality that they otherwise couldn't.
And to go along with that, I've asked this a few other times with a handful of guests, but let's use the Wi-Fi and computer metaphor. I would say our brain is like a hard drive, and our pineal gland acts like, you could say, a transmitter that can pick up these Wi-Fi signals, such as a computer does. Our soul could act in similar ways that a Wi-Fi signal does to all computer-related devices. Maybe when we are in the womb of our mother, possibly in the developmental phase of that fetus, our mother's pineal gland picks up and transmits an incoming Wi-Fi signal, aka the soul, and somehow it transmits that signal to the child. And could that be a reason why they are keeping us in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety so that they can hack the incoming soul, aka Wi-Fi signal, before it becomes implanted into the baby? If that pregnant woman is in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety, doom and gloom, and how the world is just going to chaos, these archonic demonic parasites can makes it more easily for them to latch onto that soul, that baby or spirit when it enters into us during that phase. So since that pregnant woman is in a lower vibrational state, it makes the soul hacking process possibly much easier.
No, it's true because the incoming soul. So according to occult theory, okay, the consciousness that comes from outside the physical realm clothes itself in a kind of like an astral sheath or like an astral body. Meanwhile, the fetus that's developing in the womb is being enclosed in a kind of etheric body, which is like a life force energy body, right? And then eventually those two fuse together into one composite being. But those astral and etheric components are very susceptible to being imprinted, as you said, by the astral and etheric bodies of the mother herself, okay? And also any other influences that are coming in. So I do totally agree with you that if the mother is kept in a certain state, those patterns of energy are going to be also transfused or imprinted upon the developing fetus. And not
And,
only will
and
that
then we had the residual, and then we had the residual mark once we're born, and then it kind of stays with us
yeah.
possibly forever. Maybe we can fight it, but maybe if we are not strong enough mentally, spiritually, it just takes over and consumes us.
Right. Yeah. And not to mention, when you're born, once you're outside the mother's body, outside of her energy field, now you're further imprinted by the other energy field that are around, like from, I mean, that's what astrology is. So when you're born, the astrological configurations of the sky, which I guess has to do with the underlying code of reality at that particular place and time, they also imprint upon the baby. Okay. So you know, by the time you're a kid, you have all these multiple imprints already that might be contradictory to your true soul nature. Now, I will say, just on the positive side, though, that I do think the incoming soul can, to some degree, choose or influence the circumstances of birth and perhaps even who the parent is in order to choose from that available set of options what imprints they want to imprint upon themselves in order to kind of reinforce their idea of what they want to do in that life. However, it's not perfect, and there are, as you said, other factors that also mix in. So they actually get a mix of both like self-chosen imprints, but also artificial negative imprints, and they all kind of coalesce together. And so that's why, as humans, we do still sort of follow an intentional trajectory through life that maybe benefits our soul. However, we also have a lot of negative influences as well. And so therefore our life, ends up being a mixture. It's just like any game where you've got potential rewards and you've also got potential losses. Now I like to cite the game Shoots and Ladders or
Mm.
Snakes and Ladders because right, if you land on one the wrong square, you go down a couple levels, and then the other one you go up a couple levels. Well, likewise, we've got both gains and losses in this life. And I think that same thing applies to the imprints, and that some might be beneficial and self-chosen and other ones definitely not.
So I'm about to end the discussion here in just a moment, but let's say that that there is some type of collaboration, rather psychically, subconsciously, or even consciously and or physically, with some of these aliens, entities, and some of the occultists or the elites, the shot callers in the world. And the past 100 years, what have we seen? A little over the past 100 years, we've seen a huge burst in technology. So maybe, just maybe, that this unseen shadow force that that manipulates society from the shadows, maybe they have helped with this technology. And if that's the case, maybe one reason the shadow force is possibly helping with this burst in technology is because this shadow force needs us to, let's say, be their worker bees and work as a collective, so that one day we can eventually merge with the machines and help this shadow force finally have the technology to leave this prison planet. And the reason for them wanting us to merge with machines or have this type of transhuman artificial world is so that we can be plugged in and help these entities leave this planet. Maybe they are stuck here, Tom. Maybe they're stuck within this realm, this reality. Maybe this earth is part of their domain, the unseen realm. They're here with us. We just can't see them, but they still, whether they're in our physical reality or not, they want to leave this planet or this reality that we're stuck in with them. Maybe that's the reason why that we're getting this transhuman artificial world being pushed down our throats. Maybe they're being guided. These elites are being guided by these non-humans to have a world to where we can help them ascend to other worlds or other dimensions. Because I know prison planet is an overused word, but maybe it really is. Maybe they are stuck here. What's your thoughts on all that, man?
Yeah, it's an idea that I've heard a couple other researchers also propose, and I think it's a very good idea. I would say it is not definite, but it is probable. Okay, and I mean my personal opinion is maybe it's like I don't know 60% probable, and then the other 40% is the viewpoint that I had before I heard this idea, which is that these things are not necessarily from our planet. They could actually be from other star systems. Oh, and by the way, if this world is a collective illusion, if even if it is a simulation, even within that idea, that does not prevent the so-called simulation from simulating other star systems and other worlds and space travel and time
Right.
travel and all that. So all that stuff can still happen within a false construct, right? All right. So regardless of that, these beings, in my opinion, could be from other worlds, and not only just other worlds, but also other, I don't know, realms or dimensions in a way. Because when we talk about another planet, let's say Mars, we're only thinking about it in a three-dimensional sense. What if Mars has, let's say, a fourth dimensional component or something like a parallel reality Mars, where certain beings could be from? So then technically they're from Mars, but they're not really from the Mars that we know. They're from like a parallel higher realm Mars, I guess. And the same thing could be for other star systems that are out there. So these beings may not be limited just to 3D. They could be some sort of other dimensional kind of thing in other spaces, in other places in the universe that we know, even from the future possibly or the past. So the point is, I think these beings might. Okay, look, so clearly they need us. If they didn't need us, they wouldn't be abducting. They wouldn't be trying to do mind control stuff or the whole hybrid breeding program.
Mhm.
And so, like the hybrid breeding program, what does that tell you? That tells you that they're trying to modify humans with alien DNA, more so than we already had from like thousands of years ago. But hybridize us in such a way that in order to create essentially an elite class of liaisons between them and us humans in order to rule over us. And I think that's part of the efficiency and slash control mechanism that they use for taking over planets, which is they don't invade just through physical force and like put us all in chains and try to like turn us into slaves, because that is highly risky, it's highly inefficient, and it would require an extremely large military to subdue millions and millions and millions of us. However, what if they merely mind controlled the planet, got the governments and the leadership of the planet to create like a transhumanist police state, like global police state with AI technology that's like censoring everything, and everyone's
Mhm.
like plugged into like digital ID stuff and social credit scores and all that. So what if they turn the planet into this like self-running prison planet, and then that prison planet then is managed by this elite class of hybrids that do the bidding of these off-world or other dimensional beings? See, that is an extremely efficient way of controlling an entire population. So when you talk about the things, the sort of trends that are happening now with artificial intelligence and the more and more of this like surveillance state that's being put into place, well, I think they're trying to do that. I think they're trying to turn this world into a self-running, efficient prison planet, and then they just kind of manage it from the outside, which is, that's the efficient thing to do. Like in the business world, for example, if you've got a venture capitalist or just someone who wants to make a lot of money, they buy businesses, they get it set up with their own management, and then they just feed off the profits. They're off vacationing, making money while they get other people managing the company for them, right? So they're using a similar model, just in a more extraterrestrial or interdimensional sense.
It's definitely a long game that's being played, through many different variables. I guess that, rather abductions or whatever. It's definitely like call it a age old methodical totalitarian tiptoe deception that is being played, I
Right.
think. Dude, I guess one last question: do you have hope for the survival of the human race? Do you think that, whether it be in regards to a possible collaboration with the dark side and the elites, or just these entities, or however the world is, the future, the world is might be or might turn out in years to come? Do you think?
Yeah.
Because I do think that they fear, rather, the elites, these entities. They fear the, I guess, our everything about us that makes us human. They don't want us to love, live, have family, to be on this higher vibrational frequency. They want to keep us in this lower vibrational field, and stuck in this matrix. But do you think we will prevail to where my almost two-year old daughter can have a better future? What's your gut tell you, the crossroads that we as the human race will be facing in years to come? Will things get worse before they get better, or how do you see the future and the road that we will be facing?
Yeah, well, long term, I actually am very, very hopeful. Even if short term things will get pretty rough. So, I mean, here's the thing: these beings, as I mentioned earlier, if they want to have a very efficient model, they need to have our own powers, our own governments, corrupt networks working for them, and that is one of their vulnerabilities. In that, we, if people, okay, expose a lot of these human government proxies, these corrupt elites, if they get exposed, if they get taken down, then you're basically knocking out the legs from underneath the alien agenda, because they need those ones in order to do what they want to do. And without them, then they might have to call it off because they just don't have enough of a leverage, I guess, over the collective humanity in order to have a good chance of success, at taking over this place. So, and so that's why when people say like, oh, when we're talking about alien stuff, let's leave politics out of it because politics has nothing to do with that. It's all like 3D distraction. Well, I would say not necessarily, because
It's all
what's going
interconnected.
exactly, yeah, because the politics is the front line, I guess, pawns or something of the alien agenda. So if you can take out the pawns, then it's just like taking out all the pawns in chess. Well, now the other side has much less to work with than they do otherwise. They don't have the shields. They don't have the frontline workers to do it. So that's why the politics stuff does matter in that sense. I mean, as long as you don't buy into the surface level politics, that's like, it's no different from WWE or something like professional wrestling. But if you look like a step beneath that, at some of these agendas that are going on, and you choose wisely and you expose the right sources, then yeah, you can totally take that out. So once you take that out, then yeah, things will definitely look better for us. However, at that point, we still will have the issue of the alien forces and demonic powers themselves, and the fact that if people are not aware of their existence, then they have free reign to manipulate people more directly through psychic abilities, or conditioning the vibrational sphere of Earth, and so on. So we still have to look out for that. Now, and the other thing is, as a planet, if we consent, like if we become aware of them and we consent to them coming here, like if we invite them in, then of course they're going to win. I mean, that's hands down. I mean, that'd be game over at that point. But if at the same time, if as a planet we become aware of them, but we reject them, then that counts for something too, because that's like almost like sealing off a lot of the portals or conduits or permission avenues that have been opened in the past by our shadow military or people like Crowley and Parsons and so on. So we can plug those holes again and kind of make sure that our walls of this reality are in good shape and where they can't come in as much as they used to. Now, in addition to all that, another reason why I have hope is because even in our own lives, we can tell that there is sort of an invisible, benevolent hand that is guiding the trajectory of our life. Like, I'm sure there's points in lives where we think it's all over, like we've totally been dropped off a cliff, but then there's this invisible net that catches us and kind of, puts us back on solid footing. So I do think there's an invisible, benevolent, divine hand, I guess, that is steering things as well. And in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, how there is duality within pretty much any human institution. Well, I do think that there's also duality within the military, within the government, within secret societies, and possibly even amongst some certain alien groups as well. Maybe there could be some that are more benevolent. However, one thing I've learned from studying the footprint of these benevolent aliens is that they're not like Hollywood heroes where they come in with guns blazing and take out all the bad guys and save the earth in that like GI Joe kind of sense. They're more like they work more like in a Zen Taoist kind of like in the background, very subtle maneuvers, butterfly effect, nudging one person here, like educating one person there, and basically guiding humanity towards a positive future using very subtle, very extremely sophisticated and wise nudges here and there. So I think we have that component as well going on. And so therefore, when we're up against this huge machine of the negative alien power structure and the elites and the shadow governments and so on, that entire machine, it's fragile in the sense that it's very complicated and it can't account for all variables. So there are certain variables, including our intuition, our free will, our help from divine sources, and so on. Those things it cannot account for. And so therefore, if each person just listens to their intuition, listens to their inner guidance and their wisdom, and does what feels like what they feel inspired to do in a way that makes sense to their, from top to bottom, from head to heart. If they do that, then I think they become components of a kind of positive intervention that can do moves that end up having huge consequences down the line that this negative machine cannot account for. And so I think the machine will end up crumbling and falling in upon itself due to this death by 1,000 cuts of everyone doing what they are divinely guided to do.
Well said. And this is our trial by fire moment. Well, we need the dark just to see how powerful the light really is. We have to go through the pits of hell just to realize, you know, if I've used this metaphor, just I can tell my daughter not to do something, don't do that, don't do that, don't touch the hot stove, don't touch it, don't touch it. But if she touches it, that's that trial by fire moment. Now she's learned. As long as she's okay, which I'm not going to let her touch it knowingly, but I'm just saying as a metaphor, that's our moment. That's our touching the hot stove moment, our trial by fire that, now she is wiser, she's smarter, but the thing is you have to be willing to learn from the mistakes, learn from this darkness that we're in so that we can move forward for the betterment of the world.
Right. And the darkness is sometimes obvious in the sense of a hot stove or a criminal or some sort of corrupt elite, something like that. Or it can be more subtle in the sense of, I don't know, like an alien during a CE5 event projecting the idea of benevolence when it actually isn't. There's tests of discernment, and then there's tests of just, seeing danger where it obviously is. And I think we will go through both types of trials more and more. I mean, we've seen it, right, for the past 4 to 8 to 10 years, especially the past 4. And as a result of all the suffering and all the lives lost, the ones who remained are getting increasingly awakened more and more and more. We've seen that. That's like undeniable. I mean, there's people right now who otherwise would have had no chance of even awakening from the matrix-induced slumber that they were in. And I think this is just the beginning. I mean, there's going to be more, definitely more. And as times go on, I think we will see the dark becoming darker and the light becoming brighter, and at some point, yes, there's going to be tensions, some sort of conflict. There's going to be takedowns, maybe in both directions. But I think in the end, just the way that the divine tends to work, it tends to kind of judo flip the dark side, because the dark side always has its vulnerability, always has its blind spot. And I think they're really going to be tripped up, and the entire thing is going to be used as a catalyst for essentially just mass awakening, especially anyone who can awaken. Because obviously the NPC types, they probably wouldn't, but they would just kind of fall in line with new reality if that were to happen. But I think everyone else, I think we have the potential to really step into our true potential, our true power, and the things that we'll be going through will call that out of us.
Well, Tom, man, this was a treat, honor, and privilege. Thank you very much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much.